Hello, everyone. Me again. Maybe we are the best people, but we're very tired from the full organization, so we're gonna wing this one. Since the very team is rooted in the very existence of our city, we were asked to give this lecture against our will.
True. That's true.
And since most of you are here for the first time, we kind of directed the lecture towards Sarajevo as a city and what it makes it specific in this context of community-led architecture and how we came to this point to be the city that has this strong community. And when we started talking about this lecture, where's our slide? Yep. When we started talking about this lecture and where we can start, we realized that in Sarajevo we have a word we use for community, a specific word that relates to Sarajevo community that we commonly use, and it's called Raja, or a sentence we would use is like Sarajevska Raja, which is like Sarajevo people or Sarajevo Raja. The thing is, this word is derived from an Arabic word, and it basically means, the word basically means a herd or a flock. And during the Ottoman Empire, this very word was used for all the people, Muslim and non-Muslim, that were not part of the ruling caste. Raja is not a community of specific people, number of people, bound by the territory, interest, and emotion, but rather a functioning group. It operates by acting, producing social reality in accordance with its own principles. So we would usually use it as ovo je moja Raja, ovo su moji prijatelji, my community, my closest ones with whom I share everything. So with that, welcome to Sarajevo.
Yeah, I have my own microphone. So the most common phrase that we use to describe Sarajevo, it's usually transition or transitional city. That brings many connotations. Nowadays in the European or any wider context, as a matter of fact, we talk about the green transition from fossil fuels to renewable energies. And while this word can bring many positive aspects with itself, in our context, it's a complete opposite. Because of its historical circumstances, Sarajevo has frequently been given the status of a city in transition, as it was repeatedly sandwiched between the temporal prefixes of pre and post in various historical eras, political regimes, and social and economic systems. Transition as a word suggests a time frame with a beginning and an end and an outcome. But for Sarajevo, it's a continuous state of being. And I'm not joking, this is a true thing. We would argue that word transition itself does not actually define the state that we are in, and we would rather define it as a transitional limbo. We are in a transition between socialism and capitalism, and if we say that transition is defined by time, then its physical and spatial manifestation is the in-betweenness. It is exactly the in-betweenness that we are interested in. The in-betweenness of formal and informal, global and site-specific, east and west, substance and void. Having said that, we can say that the in-betweenness is the only continuity in the historical discontinuity of Sarajevo. There's an interesting quote from the godfathers of the Sarajevan School of Architecture, Grabrian and Neidhardt, that says, "Strange people, strange customs. Why strange? These people are strange because they have been living in transitional conditions for too long, because they have been defending themselves from violence, and unlike the Western people, they never had a chance to maintain their own homogeneous culture." In order to make any sense to you today, we will have to anchor these paradigms on a site-specific level, taking Sarajevo and its historical transitions as a case study.
Sarajevo has had three historical layers, or transitions as we would call them. And in his famous book, Bosnia and the Journey to Modernity from 1957, Irhana Šehović, and you should check this book out if you have a chance, definitely, if you want to learn more about Bosnia. He argues that Bosnia is starting anew, building a nation in its cultural pattern. The thing is that ever since then, Bosnia has gone through two complete changes of the whole structure, and it has gone through three more before. So when we talk about Bosnia and its historical layers, if you go out into the city, you can really easily notice them, but we're gonna list them here today. So we start with the Middle Ages and Bosnian Kingdom, which we did not represent here, but getting there. The second one is the period of Ottoman occupation, when first urban developments of Sarajevo started happening. The third one is the Austro-Hungarian occupation, where we had our first master plan for the city. Fourth one is the period between the two wars, and then we have the socialist period of Yugoslavia, in which we had our Olympic Games, which I mentioned in the beginning. And then we come to the post-Dayton peace agreement period, in which we're right now, still. The important thing to mention is that all these transitions were caused by violence. However, beyond these historical layers that I have just mentioned, there is a deeper narrative woven into Sarajevo's fabric, the enduring heterogeneity of Bosnian and Herzegovinian society. And it's not merely a city with layers. We are also a city that is multicultural and multi-ethnic at the same time. I don't know how much you know about this, and we weren't planning to say this, but Bosnia in itself, we have 3 main ethnicities and 3 main religions we operate with. But as Sarajevo continues to evolve, it is not only the historical transitions that shapes its future, it's also the grassroots movements that are starting to happen in this in-betweenness that Dunja has mentioned, that are starting the important process of healing the city and understanding the resilience we so often talk about and the way that Sarajevo faces the adversities that have happened to it in the past.
Yeah. This presentation would not make sense if we didn't put this slide. You can see baby Irhana there and a small me with my brother and my friends after the war. I think this is 96, right?
95.
95. Both of us were born in Sarajevo under the siege. And while this is a great one interesting fact about us at get-togethers, it has shaped our realities considerably. Our Sarajevo are the wounded buildings, kids playing soldiers, proud dressed-up women walking in front of snipers, as well as learning about landmines as part of the elementary school curriculum. We are the first generation of people thinking about the past in order to heal. First generation to accept the past and work with it in order to understand what the process can result into. A common question we get is when is it time to forget about the past and move on? But can we really let go of the past and forget about it in order to heal? Our Sarajevo are the wounded buildings. Our Sarajevo are kids playing soldiers, and all of the things that I mentioned before. Our Sarajevo is a wounded city entering a long needed period of healing process. Our Sarajevo is resilient, unwavering. Our Sarajevo is a sense of belonging.
We are in the post-institutional period here, characterized by a new paradigm of developments defined by smaller projects and more fragmented spaces. Instead of relying on solutions of traditional urban governance via institutionalized channels, we are focusing on combination of bottom-up, informal, less permanent initiatives and alternative placemakings. We are exposing the in-betweenness as a new narrative, as a space to experience the healing we mentioned before. These approaches reflect the constraints we are used to, the constraints of crisis and scarcity and a need for innovative approaches for the city as ours. When there's no top-down, the bottom-up has to take much bigger role than it's maybe standard or more common around us. And in such cases as Sarajevo, the bottom-up needs really to act. It has replaced the top-down approach. The bottom-up is the biggest trigger of actions for Sarajevo and occurrences in the in-betweenness. As top-down, it denounces its responsibilities while at the same time creating opportunities for our new narratives. We wanted to mention a quote by Bernard Kohuri from a lecture he gave here in 2018. He's an architect from Beirut, and he said following, "I still venture into American territory and Western Europe, where I still do give lectures and crits and studios, but I find them to be very dormant. I feel much more at home here in Sarajevo in the sense that I feel there is a far more curious audience. Maybe because you haven't gone to sleep yet, you are still awake, and I think that is wonderful." So, on the slide, all of this summarized is that this has resulted in a lot of grassroots movements in Sarajevo, out of which many have actually started under the siege in Sarajevo and developed in, like Sarajevo Film Festival developed in the world-class festivals that have been leading the activation of our city on many layers. And with this, we just wanted to hop onto our project with Days of Architecture.
And here they are. So we'll start with just showcasing Days and Nights of Architecture. These are our two most prominent or focused projects in LIFT. These are public events that we use basically to communicate knowledge towards the local communities as platforms for development of the alternative education and for activation of public space through spatial initiatives. Both events, so both days and nights, started out of necessity. We identified the flaws in our formal education system and we wanted to act on it. These two formats we use to exchange knowledge with the international, regional and local communities.
The next one is the first project we worked on with LINA. It's first time ever we kind of dropped the context, because in Sarajevo we talk a lot about context, right? But if you ask someone what is the context of Sarajevo, no one can actually pinpoint it easily. So even in this lecture, maybe it was difficult for us to understand. So in the first project, we actually wanted to strip away any context that we carry with ourselves and try to understand what is the context one can create by just existing in the city and first time meeting the city. So we had a residency in Sarajevo where we had LINA creatives, and we actually walked the same walk. We're going to walk with you tomorrow, but did not give them any information about it. So it was just a bit of a reverse process. And what we asked them is, what is context to them? And we were quite surprised because the first thing that they pointed out is the greenery in the city, which probably is obvious to you all, which was not obvious to us at all. Because, I mean, it's an easy explanation. While we were growing up, landmines were all around the city, so we were forbidden from going into the mountains our whole lives. And this has just changed recently, like 5 to 10 years ago. It has been safe to go into the mountains. So for us, the greenery in our city and the nature relation is very abstract. And then bringing people who point this out, and they created a huge collage, which we did not put there in the corner, in which they compared it to Himalayas, and it was quite inspiring for us from this perspective. So I think that's that on that.
And the third project slide that we want to show is, there are 4 projects put on here. These 4 projects were the ones that completely put us out of our comfort zone, deeply and profoundly. We collaborated with LINA Fellow to produce an architecture movie about a wounded postmodernist gem of Sarajevo, Dom Pensionera. We collaborated with Francesco from Volume and Alessandro Meris, who was curator of the Italian Pavilion in Venice Biennale in 2021, to produce a short documentary where we tried to dive deeper into the role of architects and urbanists during wartime. And we published 2 books, The Architecture Guide to Sarajevo and 3,650 Days of Contemporary Architecture in Bosnia and Herzegovina. All of these projects were projects that enabled us to embrace the wounds and kind of dive deep into the past, accepting that past in order to kind of reflect on it and try to move on and heal. And many times, the processes that we work on are invisible. They are hard, long, exhausting, and no one can actually see them. Many times we come in front of closed doors, whether it's the municipality or the canton or anyone. Many times we wonder if we are actually doing the right thing anyway. But it is incredible how this context of in-betweenness that we try to identify has offered us a sea of opportunities to generate certain kinds of knowledge that we can actually use to make our city a nicer place, I hope.
Better place. Yeah, very often we get the question, when are we going to forget and move on? And as ignorant as that question is, it really is out there and often asked. And for us, it took a long time to accept the scars and the reality we were born in and grew up with, and just embrace it to start the healing process of our city. So that's what we wanted to share today with you. We are short. We have much more time left.
Yes, but I think this is okay. feel free to ask questions later, not now.
No. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think it would be good. Does anyone have any questions about their lecture, about Sarajevo, about where we are?
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. I know you're tired, so thank you so much for sharing this with us. I was particularly shocked, or at least taken by the fact of the relationship to the land, right? The fact that there were mines, and so that was a land that you couldn't venture into. And I was wondering then, how did that shape your perception of built ground? Like, did asphalt represent something which was safe, and how did that condition then really shape your understanding of land and your perception to it?
I mean, the one thing that our parents used to tell us when we were younger is like, stay on the asphalt road. So there is no option where you can just walk randomly on the grass, because, I mean, even today I have some doubts, but everything is like super, there's no mines anymore, so just to we're clear. But this kind of stuck with us, at least with me. I'm a bit more paranoid than Irhana. So yes, the built environment represented a very much safe place. It was a place that most definitely you could easily identify a threat. There's no trees or bushes or something that can just pop out of. There's no grass that you can just randomly step on and there's a mine on it. I mean, both of us went into competitions on how to recognize mines and how to behave when you step on a mine. That was part of our curriculum at schools.
Yeah, and when we talk architecture, it's probably very different to what we perceive architecture now. Like the safe spaces, we later on we found some photos of us in Sarajevo in 1995, some more, where you can actually see Sarajevo behind us. This asphalt we're talking about is a very wide term of asphalt in a way. Like we grew up in this odd environment at the times, but it's also like very often when we talk about this, both Dunja and I had this situation where we made people cry, not by accident, but like for us, this reality of childhood in war was our reality. Like we were born and raised with this, and all children around us were the same. So I would say it was a happy childhood, as long as you stay on the asphalt. So.
I mean, maybe from this perspective, when I look on it at the time, maybe it did shape, but my both parents are architects, and they both were part of the rebuild of Sarajevo after the war. So my first memories of Sarajevo and its buildings were like torn apart, broken buildings, which I honestly find even beautiful, I mean, in a way. But I think that the fact that my parents were part of the rebuilding of the city kind of contributed to the fact that I think that architecture was a medium to kind of work with.
For me, it was more from this. So when we were really little, there was a lot of slums around Sarajevo, a lot of really poor people, a lot of like people with mental issues and things. And this element of helping someone around you was really, really strong. Like our community could only survive by people being together and helping each other. So I always had this huge need. My first humanitarian action I organized, I was like second class in primary school. Like it's just, this was kind of a mindset that we had to have in order to help everyone, because you were in a class with like half of the class of people were really poor and did not have a place to live at the time. So yeah, or their parents died or lost, like there's so many layers to it. And only recently I reflected onto this, that this is crazy early to start something like this. You're like 9 years old. But this idea of helping, this kind of for me developed into architecture, because I had this huge idealistic idea of a better environment for all of us. And yeah, that's where it started for me. And I only realized this like half a year ago, actually, by reflecting with someone.
Hi. I find this injunction to move on extremely brutal, and and I think many people who lived in cities that I've known, like a lot of spatial trauma also cannot hear the word resilience anymore because it's almost an insult at that point. But so I'm wondering whether the idea of no longer thinking of time as linear, which I understand also in Sarajevo is particular because the city is literally a linear manifestation of time, but and think of it no longer as like how far away are we from the trauma, but more trying to think of a time that is more atmospheric, so to speak. Is that generative for you in any way? And I know it's architects don't like to think about time that much, but to really think to go outside of this paradigm of a linear time to perhaps no longer run away from what needs to be run away from, but actually live with it. Like, is that helpful at all?
Yeah, that's why it's like. It cannot be that way. Linear, in a way, linear time implies that we're leaving something behind, that something has happened, and we're really good at, as architects, just ignoring something and then going on and building something completely new. So I think this kind of discourse is coming back into architecture generally with all the reuse. And I mean, now I'm comparing things, but just if we put into that perspective, I think we as architects are thinking more about less linearly, but same with healing the cities and wounded, like we're not going to go away from it. And I think only when we accepted that this has to be part of us and that is like, it's hard when something is imposed onto you. I think this was our biggest problem. We have this inherited, like we were born in the war, right? Which means that we were like 2 and 3 when the war ended. So we don't really know, but we are marked by it. So once, for a long time, you don't really, you don't take it with yourself. You try to want to get rid of it because it's not part of you somehow, but it is. So I think this part where you start accepting this, the time stops in a way. I don't perceive it linearly anymore because this is important and this is us and this is where it starts and ends in a way. Like there is the solution somewhere there, I think.
Yeah, I have nothing to say.
Is their next question? Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. I'm also thankful to your parents and you that you survived and you bring that such an impressive impact into not only your city but also all over. But my question is, I understand your acceptance and it's really grown up position, and but how do you imagine your city for the next generation? Do you want to, or I don't know, like if you think about that, like I understand how it's hard to think about the future, but in general, like are there any ideas or thoughts in your community how will this trauma or like this already your past will go further? Like, do you want, like, of course we always think about this culture of remembrance and like commemoration of the past, but interesting how you, yeah, are there any works or ideas on the future?
I mean, I hope there are. I hope that someone will think of something. But no, I mean, obviously, like we're all trying to go beyond our personal trauma, and even if it's like a real trauma or inherited trauma, but like Irhana said in the presentation, like it becomes difficult when you're working from bottom up and then you don't have a response from the top. It kind of makes you feel like you're wandering around lost. There's a saying in Bosnia, like a fly without a head, you know, like just zooing around. But obviously we would not be here if I was so negative, right? So I do have to hope that things can become better. But I truly believe that the community-led things, not just architecture, but anything coming out of the community is at least a good first step. Or
yeah, at some point we were thinking that concluding the presentation with another thing. It's if we're talking about this transition in the city of Sarajevo, which has lasted for 30 years, right? So we cannot call it a transition anymore because there's nothing transitional about it. But you often think about why you're stuck there. Is it the Dayton Agreement? Is this? And then you're always pinpointing things. But it is also, once you're pinpointing it, you're like, it's the Americans. you also start questioning where do you want to go, what is it? Like Sarajevo as such cannot really transition into where a lot of countries are right now, Western countries. It's not the Sarajevo with all its layers and definition and multicultural, we just don't want to. It doesn't, the system that we're supposed to transfer into is not the system we want. And we're all clear about this one thing. Maybe we don't agree on many other things, but this one thing we're clear. So what is it that, where are we going? And this relates to architecture, to life, to food, to whatever we think about, right, in this sense. So we did not know how to conclude with this. So we did not, but we were really wondering what would it be, because it's, at the end, maybe like if you take away all these institutions and to the side we just stay like Sarajevska Raja, right? And maybe we would have it great like that.